Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. Today's video is going to be about hidden gem fragrances, or in other words, fragrances that are good enough to, and deserve more attention than they're currently getting, more exposure. At least in my humble opinion, all the fragrances that I'm going to show you today deserve more attention and they deserve to be checked out. So today I've prepared a list of 11 hidden gem fragrances from my collection. Now, some of the fragrances that I'm going to show in today's video I have just recently reviewed on my channel. I've done full reviews, so you can check out my channel to see my full thoughts on those fragrances that I've recently reviewed. And I'm going to start with one such scent that comes from the house of Athoor, and it's called Alhur So Intense. This is a very interesting sort of a hybrid clone, let's call it that. It incorporates two different very likable, very popular DNAs. On one hand you have the Sauvage Elixir DNA, and then on the other hand you have the Bleu de Chanel EDP DNA. This leans a lot heavier towards the Sauvage Elixir side, but it carries quite a lot of similarities to Bleu de Chanel, especially on the dry down. The opening in here is a lot closer to Sauvage. You get Sauvage Elixir, you get that spicy, ambery opening that you get out of the original fragrance with a strong licorice note as well. This lacks a bit of that crisp spiciness that you get out of the Sauvage Elixir, and in the opening it's like a mix of 90% Sauvage Elixir and 10% Bleu de Chanel. When this goes into the dry down, it becomes sweeter, it becomes more woody, and the dry down is more like a mix of 60% Sauvage Elixir and 40% Bleu de Chanel EDP. On the dry down you get that sort of a creamy woodiness that you get out of the original Bleu de Chanel. It's a very likable scent, a very versatile fragrance that has a pretty decent performance, about 7 to 8 hours of performance on my skin. It's very masculine and it's a compliment getter, and as I said, it's super versatile. The next one that I'm going to show you is yet another of my more recent reviews, fragrances that I've showed you recently, and in fact I also featured this into an episode of Fragrance Battle. It comes from the house of Grandeur and it's called Iconic Nuit per Homme. It comes from the house of Grandeur. And this fragrance is a direct clone, and it's a fantastic direct clone of YSL La Nuit de l'Homme Blue Electric. And in my humble opinion, this is the closest thing that you can get to Blue Electric, scent wise. It doesn't have any twists, it's just a straight up clone of Blue Electric. You get that spicy, woody, creamy, lavendery, sexy scent profile that you get out of the original. You get that ginger note in the opening in here that adds freshness, just like the original does. Maybe one way that this differs compared to the original is that it has a slightly stronger cardamom note in the opening, giving it a little bit more of a spicy turn. But other than that, it's very close in the opening, and the dry down is pretty much identical to what you get with the original fragrance. You get a magnetic cap, you get nice presentation, it's very cheap, and probably the only sort of a con of this fragrance is the fact that it doesn't last that long. It lasts about 6 hours, maybe 6.5 hours, with a sort of a moderate projection in the first 1 hour. The next one is my latest reviewed fragrance that comes from the house of Paris Corner, and it's called Fakhir. And this is probably my most favorite Paris Corner scent in my collection at this current time. It's a fantastic fragrance that's supposedly a clone of Giza's Imperial Valley. I've never tried the original fragrance, although judging by the fact of how much I like this one, I definitely need to try the original. It's a very interesting scent that opens up very bright, very citrusy, very fresh, even slightly green and minty, but you get quite a lot of ambery sweetness in the opening. You get a nice amount of leather, and the dry down is very leathery, very ambery, with still a nice amount of citrusy freshness in the background, with a woody backbone. It's a very interesting scent, and I absolutely love this combination of leather, amber and citruses, with even a touch of oud in here as well, giving it a Middle Eastern vibe. Fantastic performance, fantastic projection, you know, almost perfectly unisex fragrance, maybe leaning a little bit to the masculine side, but still, you know, I think it's a pretty versatile and pretty unisex fragrance. And again, I absolutely love Fakhir. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Mesa Nar. I've not done a full review of this fragrance yet, but I should probably do one in the next week or two, because this fragrance isn't really, I think, sort of a hidden gem from the house of Mesa Nar, and it's called Maitre de Blue. This fragrance is another sort of an hybrid clone, but this you know, the hybrid in here is between two very similar fragrances. On one hand you have the Bleu de Chanel EDP DNA, and then on the other hand you have the Bleu de Chanel Parfum DNA. It's a very interesting mix. The opening to my nose seems a little bit closer to the EDP side. It opens up, you know, bright and citrusy, you know, kind of woody like you get with the original fragrance, with the EDP, original EDP scent. But then on the dry down, this goes a little bit darker. It goes a little bit sweeter, a little bit more woody. And on the dry down, it seems to lean a little bit closer to the parfum side. A very, very interesting scent. Another very, very versatile fragrance, you know, blue fragrance. The original Bleu de Chanel is known for being one of the kings when it comes to blue scents. And Maitre de Blue from Mesa Nar is actually very, very nicely done. No harshness or anything like that. Pretty good quality, very low price tag. And another surprisingly, you know, good area for this fragrance is its performance. It's actually, so far in my testing, has been giving me about 8 hours of performance, which is you know, almost better than the original scents. And in fact, this in my opinion even is a little bit louder, projects a little bit better than the original scents. The next two fragrances will be from the house of Armaf, and the first one is not necessarily a hidden gem. It's more like a fragrance that initially got some hype, and nowadays I don't see many people talking about this one, and I think it deserves more attention because it's a great fragrance on its own. And it's called ARF Hunter Killer. The ugliest bottle ever probably, but the scent inside is very, very nice. It's another of those hybrid type of clones. It's not necessarily a direct clone of anything. On one hand you have the Mancera Red Tobacco DNA, on the other hand you got the Guerlain L'Homme Ideal DNA. You know, it leans a little bit more to the Mancera Red Tobacco DNA, but it has more sweetness and more softness like you get with the L'Homme Ideal. It's very nicely done, sort of on fruity cherry vibe with, you know, tobacco, quite a lot of sweet notes in here. Fantastic performer, fantastic projection, very low price tag, especially nowadays after the initial hype died down. And you know, I really think that, you know, ARF Hunter Killer deserves more attention than it currently gets. The next fragrance from Armaf that I'm going to show in this video is one of their older fragrances, and you know, I like to mention this fragrance from time to time in my videos because I really think that this fragrance deserves you know, a lot more attention than it gets, a lot more exposure. The fragrance is called ARF Signature Night, and this is a very, very interesting sort of a clone of Bulgari's Men in Black with a bit of a spice bomb you know, vibes as well. You get that very nice, spicy, slightly tobacco vibe with this fragrance. Very elegant, very sophisticated scent, very gentlemanly fragrance. You get a magnetic cap, which is always a nice touch. I've always enjoyed, you know, fragrances that come with magnetic caps. It's very nicely done. The quality is pretty good. The only problem with this fragrance, sort of a con that I can find with this one, is the lack of performance. The staying power on skin is not that bad, about 7 hours, but this is more of an intimate type of scent. But to be honest, especially Bulgari's Men in Black, you know, has never been known to be a great performer, especially when it comes to projection. This is like a slightly more spicy, slightly less sweet take on the Bulgari's Men in Black DNA, but I think it really, really deserves more attention. The next two fragrances will be from the house of Afnan, and the first one that I'm going to talk about is called Tobacco Rush. And this is an absolutely fantastic fragrance, super masculine scent that I absolutely love. This is yet another sort of a take on Mancera's Red Tobacco DNA, but the way that this differs compared to the original is that it has a lot less sweetness and it has a super strong, super masculine leather note in here. It's spicy, it's tobacco-y with a very, very strong leather note. Lately, I've seemed to really started to enjoy quite a lot, you know, leather-based fragrances, and Tobacco Rush has a strong leather note. You get a very, very strong magnetic cap, probably the strongest magnetic cap that I've seen on a bottle of a fragrance. You get nice presentation. It's a little bit more expensive, but especially with Afnan fragrances, my experience has always been that they have absolutely fantastic quality. Beast mode performer, beast mode projector. It's a masculine scent that's great for the cold weather. The next fragrance that I'm going to show you is yet another Afnan, but it's technically an Afnan fragrance, but it comes from one of their sub brands that's called Zimaya, and the fragrance is called Royal Paragon. And this is another sort of a hybrid clone, at least in my opinion, and this is cloning two different scents. One hand you get the original Parfum de Marly's latent DNA, and then on the other hand you have the Parfum de Marly's exclusive latent exclusive DNAs. The opening here to my nose is a little bit closer to the original latent. You get that fruity, you know, apple based fragrance with lots of vanilla, lots of spices, you know, a bit of a mint, some hint of a freshness. But then on the dry down, this thing, at least in my opinion, turns a little bit darker. It becomes more woody, and it starts to get closer to the exclusive flanker of latent. I really like the bottle design. The quality is very nice. You know, performance here is a little bit above average, not as good as the original scents, but still this will give me about 7 to 8 hours of performance with very loud projection in the first hour and a half. The previous fragrance that I showed you was a clone of, you know, a mix between latent and latent exclusive. This one that I'm going to show you, the next one, is an actual straight up clone of latent exclusive. It comes from the House of Fragrance world, and it's called Anaqeed. Very interesting fragrance. One of my sort of recent you know, acquisitions, you know, one of my recent members that I've added to my collection. And as I said, this is a clone of latent exclusive, and it's done really nicely. I'm still testing this one out, but the, you know, the interesting thing here is that the opening to my nose feels even a little bit darker compared to the exclusive flanker of latent. On the dry down, it becomes pretty close. You get that you know, again, that DNA of some sweet fruity notes, like an apple note. You get quite a lot of vanilla, you got a slight hint of freshness, some woodiness, but on the dry down this becomes darker because there's an oud note in here that adds a little bit more seriousness and even a little bit of a Middle Eastern vibe. I'm still testing the performance, but so far seems to be quite adequate, between somewhere between 7 to 8 hours of performance, which in my opinion is pretty decent and above average. The next one comes again from the House of Fragrance world, but this time from one of their sub-brands that's called Athoor Al-Alam, and the fragrance is called Fakhir. This thing is a clone, and actually a very good clone of Givenchy Gentleman Reserve Privé. You get that you know, sweet iris fragrance that has quite a lot of you know, ambery, vanilla, and tonka bean sweetness, a bit of powderness. You get some boozy notes in here. It's very nicely done. In fact, feels a little bit sweeter compared to the original scent, and even a touch bit maybe more powdery compared to Reserve Privé. But otherwise, it's very nicely done. Performance here is pretty adequate, about 7 to 8 hours of performance, nice projection, maybe even a little bit louder compared to the original fragrance. Price tag is usually pretty low. You know, I really like the bottle, the presentation. The only con of this fragrance is the fact that it comes in an 80 ml bottle size. But apart from that, you know, this is a very nice fragrance, very sexy scent, very nice fragrance for the colder months, especially nighttime, you know, and something like date night. This can work pretty nicely for that. And the last fragrance featured in today's video will come from the House of Mesa Nar, and it's called Oud Intense. This fragrance is a clone of Dior Homme Intense. It's very nicely done, very high quality. It feels a little bit more woody, as the name would suggest, compared to the original fragrance. Maybe feels a little bit less powdery compared to Dior Homme Intense, but you still get you know, pretty close to the original scent in that you know, that lipsticky powdery iris that's aided by some musk, some woods, maybe a hint of freshness in the opening of the fragrance. Very nicely done. Again, the only con with this fragrance is the bottle size, which is 80 milliliters, and the bottle design. I'm not really a huge fan of that, but apart from that, this is very nicely done. Performance is about 8 hours. Projection is pretty similar to what you get with the original fragrance. All in all, it's very nicely done, and the price tag, as long as you can find this, you know, can be a little bit more pricey compared to some of the other clones of Dior Homme Intense. But if you cannot get your hands on Dark Door Intense or Cayenne Classic, for example, then I think this is one of the better options apart from those fragrances, especially compared to Dark Door Intense, because Oud Intense has a better performance. And so guys, in today's video I showed you 11 hidden gem fragrances, or in other words, fragrances that deserve deserve more attention than they're currently getting, at least in my humble opinion. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.